Canada, renowned worldwide for its delicious maple syrup and celebrated as the home to nearly all of the greatest hockey players of all time, stands as the second largest nation on Earth. This vast territory encompasses approximately 2 million lakes, containing over 50% of the freshwater lakes on the entire planet. The sheer scale of Canada's natural resources and geographical expanse has shaped its history in profound ways. For many thousands of years before European contact, this expansive region was populated with numerous indigenous tribes. These were hardy, resilient people who developed the capability to overcome the severe and lengthy winters that characterize much of the Canadian landscape. Through ingenuity, adaptation, and deep knowledge of the land, these First Nations peoples not only survived but thrived, developing unique and sophisticated cultures, languages, and societies that would leave an indelible mark on the nation that would eventually emerge. The first non-native people to settle in Canada and the New World in general that we know of with certainty were the Vikings. These Norse seafarers, venturing westward from Greenland, built a settlement in Newfoundland around 1000 AD. This remarkable achievement, centuries before Columbus, represents one of the earliest documented transatlantic crossings and settlements. However, the fate of this Viking settlement remains shrouded in mystery and scholarly debate. It is unclear exactly how long this settlement was occupied, or whether there were additional Viking settlements in the region that have yet to be discovered. Ultimately, the Newfoundland settlement was either abandoned by its inhabitants, pillaged by hostile forces, or its residents succumbed to disease or harsh conditions. Some theories even suggest the Vikings may have assimilated into the local indigenous population. Regardless of what actually transpired, the Viking presence in North America would fade into legend and obscurity for centuries, leaving behind only archaeological traces and ancient sagas. Nearly 500 years later, in 1497, the Italian explorer Giovanni Caboto, sailing under the English flag and known in English as John Cabot, became the first European of the modern age of exploration to explore North America's eastern coast. He claimed these lands for the English crown, establishing England's initial claim to territories in the New World. This voyage marked the beginning of sustained European interest in the region. Shortly after Cabot's expedition, the Spanish and the Portuguese would follow suit, sending their own explorers and making their own territorial claims to various parts of North America. However, despite these grand claims by European powers, the land largely remained unsettled by Europeans for several more decades. The only European presence consisted of seasonal fishing outposts, established primarily by Basque fishermen who came to exploit the incredibly rich cod fisheries off the Grand Banks. These temporary settlements would persist until more permanent French colonization efforts began in earnest. In 1534, the French explorer Jacques Cartier embarked on his first voyage to North America, claiming the land for France and initiating what would become New France. Cartier named the Gulf and the great river he discovered after St. Lawrence because he arrived on St. Lawrence's feast day. This river would become the lifeline of French colonization efforts, providing access deep into the interior of the continent. The French adopted the name Canada for the territory surrounding the river, taking it from the native Iroquoian word Kanata, which simply meant village or settlement. This linguistic borrowing represents one of the first of many indigenous influences on the emerging European presence in North America. What began as a name for a small area would eventually come to represent an entire nation. The early years of French colonization were marked by tremendous hardship and repeated failure. Several attempts at establishing permanent settlements succumbed to starvation, disease, and the brutal winters that early colonists were ill-prepared to endure. Many colonists perished, and survivors were often forced to abandon their settlements and return to France. However, French determination eventually prevailed, and by the early 17th century, the cities of Quebec, 1608, and Port Royal, 1605, were successfully established as permanent settlements, laying the foundation for New France. By 1670, the English colonies along the Atlantic seaboard to the south had expanded considerably in population and territory. The English also established new settlements in Newfoundland and in the vast territory south of Hudson Bay, which would be granted to the Hudson's Bay Company as a commercial monopoly called Rupert's Land. This English expansion set the stage for inevitable conflict with French territorial ambitions. The fur trade, particularly in beaver pelts, emerged as the economic engine driving expansion into the interior of North America. Beaver fur became extremely lucrative as it became the favored material for hat makers and luxury winter clothing manufacturers in Northern Europe. The fashion trends of European aristocracy literally shaped the fate of North America. The demand for beaver pelts was so intense that it greatly encouraged further northern settlement by both English and French fur trappers, all seeking to make their fortunes in this wilderness trade. The French and the English did not peacefully coexist in this new world. The French temporarily seized much of the territory around Hudson Bay during the lengthy and complex period known as the Beaver Wars, which lasted throughout much of the 17th century. However, this was not simply a European conflict. Indigenous peoples were not merely passive observers, but active and powerful participants, shaping the outcome of these struggles. The Europeans were not the only ones who became wealthy and influential from the trade in beaver pelts. The Iroquois Confederation, consisting of 6 powerful and well-organized tribes, obtained European firearms and leveraged their geographic position to become dominant players in the fur trade. Initially allied with Dutch merchants and later with the English, the Iroquois aggressively attacked French traders and most other indigenous tribes in the region in order to control access to furs and expand their own commercial empire. Many other tribes, recognizing the existential threat posed by Iroquois expansion, banded together with the French to halt the Confederation's aggressive territorial expansion. The resulting conflicts were brutal and devastating. Peace was finally negotiated after 72 years of intermittent warfare that cost countless lives, predominantly indigenous lives, yet resulted in surprisingly little permanent territorial change. The Beaver Wars demonstrated that indigenous peoples were sophisticated political actors pursuing their own interests, not simply pawns in European imperial games. The region of New France eventually consisted of several distinct colonial territories, Canada and Louisiana were the largest and most significant, stretching from the Gulf of St. Lawrence to the Gulf of Mexico along the Mississippi River system. Smaller colonies included Plaisance, located in Newfoundland, and Acadia, roughly corresponding to modern-day Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and parts of Maine. The British Empire obtained Acadia from the French through the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which concluded a complicated series of negotiations concerning the War of Spanish Succession in Europe. In this same treaty, France also recognized the legitimacy of the Hudson's Bay Company's commercial and territorial claim over the vast region called Rupert's Land, which comprised much of northern and western Canada. Interestingly, the Hudson's Bay Company, founded in 1670, is still in existence today, primarily operating as owners of a retail department store chain that still bears their historic name, one of the oldest continuously operating companies in the world. Despite controlling a larger territory than the British colonies, the French in North America increasingly became outnumbered by the rapidly growing British colonial population to the south. By the middle of the 18th century, British colonists outnumbered French colonists by a staggering margin of approximately 10-1. This demographic disadvantage would prove decisive when the next major conflict erupted between the two European powers. The 7 Years' War, known in North America as the French and Indian War, would determine the fate of New France. This conflict, lasting from 1754 to 1763, was truly a world war, fought on multiple continents, but nowhere were the consequences more dramatic than in North America. As hostilities began, French-speaking Acadians were forcibly deported far from the Canadian borderlands in what became known as the Great Expulsion, or Le Grand Dérangement. Thousands of Acadians were scattered across the British colonies, with some eventually settling in Louisiana, where they formed the basis of the distinctive Cajun culture of modern-day Louisiana and New Orleans. Both the English and French empires committed substantial military resources to North America during this war, sending thousands of regular infantry regiments across the Atlantic to fight, supported by local colonial militias and various allied indigenous tribes. The war saw unprecedented levels of European military involvement in North America. The greatly outnumbered French forces relied heavily on their indigenous allies and employed guerrilla tactics effectively. In the early years of the war, they fought the British to a standstill, winning several significant battles and raids. However, British naval superiority eventually allowed them to cut off French reinforcements and supplies. The tide turned decisively when British forces successfully besieged the strategic cities of Quebec in 1759 and Montreal in 1760, the two most important centers of New France. Despite the French later managing to defeat the British in a pitched battle outside Quebec in 1760, they failed to retake their capital city due to lack of supplies and reinforcements. In the Treaty of Paris that formally ended the war in 1763, France made the momentous decision to cede all of Canada to Britain, while transferring the Louisiana Territory west of the Mississippi to her ally Spain as compensation. This treaty fundamentally transformed the map of North America, eliminating France as a territorial power on the continent. It is crucial to understand that at this time, much of North America's vast interior and non-coastal areas remained largely unpopulated by European settlers. Many indigenous tribes had been heavily depleted through decades of warfare, and even more devastatingly, through invasive European diseases such as smallpox, measles, and influenza, against which they had little or no natural immunity. Entire communities were wiped out by epidemics, fundamentally altering the balance of power across the continent. With a population of approximately 3 million, the American colonies to the south waged a successful rebellion against the British Crown beginning in 1775, a little over a decade after the end of the 7 Years' War. During the American Revolutionary War, the Americans attempted an invasion of Quebec in the winter of 1775-76, hoping to make it the 14th colony and believing French Canadians would join their cause against Britain. However, this invasion failed, and Quebec remained loyal to Great Britain, a decision that would permanently shape Canada's distinct identity separate from the United States. After American independence was secured in 1783, many British loyalists, colonists who had remained faithful to the Crown during the Revolution, moved north into Canada to escape persecution and start new lives under British rule. This influx of loyalists significantly increased the English-speaking population of Canada and created new communities, particularly in what would become Ontario and the Maritime provinces. During the War of 1812, which lasted from 1812 to 1815, both British forces, including Canadian militia, and American armies launched several ambitious invasions of each other's territory. The Americans hoped to finally conquer Canada, while the British sought to reclaim territory lost in the Revolution. However, both sides found these invasions extraordinarily difficult, and all major offensives ultimately failed. The war ended in a military stalemate with the Treaty of Ghent in 1814, which essentially maintained the status quo, with no significant territorial changes. However, the treaties and negotiations following the war did establish a more formalized and clearly defined border between British North America and the United States, settling many disputes and reducing tensions. The war also fostered a distinct Canadian identity and pride, as Canadians had successfully defended their territory against American invasion. Despite consistently demonstrating their desire not to join their American neighbors to the south, movements for self-rule and democratic reform increasingly grew among the Canadian lower and middle classes throughout the 1820s and 1830s. These movements culminated in the armed rebellions of 1837 and 1838, which erupted in both Upper Canada, modern Ontario, and Lower Canada, modern Quebec, simultaneously. The rebellions were severely dealt with by British authorities and were ultimately crushed through military force. The uprising in Upper Canada included the brief establishment of a short-lived Republic of Canada on Navy Island by the reformer William Lyon Mackenzie, which lasted only a few weeks before being suppressed. Despite the Republic's short-lived existence and diminutive size, the rebellions demonstrated widespread support for democratic reform, not only from many Canadians, both French and English-speaking, but also from sympathetic Americans to the South, who provided some support to the rebels. The rebellions shocked the British government and spurred them to make major political concessions to prevent future unrest. The Act of Union in 1840 united Upper and Lower Canada into the new single province of Canada, merging their separate governments. More significantly, the granting of responsible government in the 1840s allowed for a far greater degree of self-rule to be exercised by elected representatives of the people rather than British-appointed governors. This was a crucial step toward Canadian self-governance. In 1846, the long-disputed Oregon Territory, claimed by both Great Britain and the United States, was peaceably divided between the two nations through diplomatic negotiation rather than warfare. The border was established essentially by extending the 49th parallel westward to the Pacific Ocean and giving Vancouver Island to British North America, Canada, creating the modern border between Canada and the United States in the Pacific Northwest. Throughout the 19th century, Canada experienced a massive boom in the logging industry that transformed its economy and society. The seemingly endless forests of Canada provided timber that was in enormous demand for shipbuilding, construction, and fuel in rapidly industrializing Britain and other European nations. This logging boom fueled large waves of immigration to Canada, particularly from Ireland, Scotland, and England, as workers sought employment in the lumber camps and sawmills. The logging industry gradually replaced the fur trade as Canada's most lucrative and economically important industry, representing a shift from extractive trade in wildlife to extractive industry in natural resources that would characterize much of Canada's economic development. In 1867, a pivotal moment in Canadian history occurred with the passage of the British North America Act, more commonly referred to today as the Constitution Act. This legislation formally established Canada as a self-governing federal dominion, creating a confederation that initially united the province of Canada, which was divided into Ontario and Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick. Ottawa was designated as the capital city of this new nation. This was not full independence. Canada remained part of the British Empire, and the British government retained significant powers. But it represented a major step toward Canadian autonomy and created the constitutional framework that would allow Canada to develop as a distinct nation with its own democratic institutions and federal government structure. To the west, in 1869-70, the Hudson's Bay Company negotiated the sale of the vast Rupert's Land to the newly formed Canadian government, opening the West to Canadian expansion. However, this land was not empty wilderness. The Métis people, who were of mixed European, primarily French, and indigenous ancestry, constituted the largest population in the Winnipeg area of what is now Manitoba. They had lived on this land for generations, developing their own distinct culture and way of life. Fearing that the land they had held and cultivated for generations would be seized by newcomers from eastern Canada without respect for their rights or existing claims, the Métis rose in armed resistance. Under the leadership of Louis Riel, they created a provisional government and occupied Fort Garry. After a tense standoff and negotiations, followed by an
eventual military occupation by Canadian federal troops, many of the Métis demands were met, respecting their land rights and securing the creation of Manitoba as a bilingual province in 1870. However, Louis Riel, the charismatic and controversial leader of this rebellion, would lead another, larger but ultimately less successful rebellion 15 years later in 1885, known as the Northwest Rebellion. This second uprising ended with Riel's capture, trial for treason, and execution by hanging in November 1885. Louis Riel's death transformed him into either a martyr or a villain, depending on one's perspective, and it significantly increased tensions between Indigenous peoples, Métis, English Canadians, and French Canadians, divisions that would echo through Canadian politics for generations. An important consequence of the 1885 rebellion was its impact on the Canadian Pacific Railway. The partially completed Transcontinental Railway played a crucial role in the suppression of the rebellion by rapidly transporting troops westward. This demonstration of the railway's strategic importance caused political support for completing it to surge dramatically among English-speaking Canadians and in the federal government. With renewed political will and financial backing, the massive engineering project was completed in only 4 years from when serious construction had resumed. The completion of the railway in 1885 was a transformative moment. It physically united Canada from coast to coast, opened the western prairies to settlement and agriculture, and created a truly transcontinental nation. The 1890s witnessed the legendary Klondike Gold Rush, one of the last great gold rushes in North America. When gold was discovered in the remote Yukon region in 1896, over 100,000 prospectors set out on the arduous journey to Canada's far north, hoping to strike it rich in the gold fields. The journey itself was treacherous, requiring prospectors to cross dangerous mountain passes and navigate wild rivers. Some prospectors did indeed find gold and made fortunes, but the vast majority didn't, arriving too late or simply having bad luck. Nevertheless, the gold rush brought substantial development and population to Canada's far north and captured the imagination of the world, becoming the stuff of legend and countless stories. After several decades of relatively stagnant population growth, largely due to substantial emigration from Canada to the United States, where economic opportunities seemed greater, Canada's population sharply increased in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This growth was driven by an improving economy, the opening of the western prairies to agricultural settlement, and high levels of immigration from Europe, particularly from Britain, Eastern Europe, and Scandinavia. The Canadian government actively promoted immigration to settle the West and develop the nation's resources. During the First World War, which began in 1914, Canada, still legally a dominion of the United Kingdom with limited control over its own foreign policy, was automatically at war when Britain declared war on Germany. Canada sent an extraordinary 620,000 troops to fight in Europe, out of a total population of only about 8 million, a massive commitment representing a significant portion of the nation's young men. The war's cost was staggering and traumatic for the young nation. 67,000 Canadian soldiers would die in the conflict, while another 170,000 would be wounded, a combined casualty rate of nearly 40% of those who served. The horrific battles at Vimy Ridge, Passchendaele, and the Somme became seared into Canadian memory. The staggering casualty rate grieved and shocked the entire nation, with virtually every community losing sons, fathers, and brothers. The shared sacrifice and the distinct achievements of Canadian forces during the war had a profound impact on Canadian nationalism and national identity. The war strengthened the desire among Canadians to self-govern their own international affairs, rather than having their foreign policy determined entirely by Britain. This aspiration was realized when the British Parliament passed the Statute of Westminster in 1931, which formally acknowledged Canada's co-equal status with the United Kingdom and granted Canada full legal independence in both domestic and foreign affairs, though Canada chose to maintain its symbolic connection to the Crown. Between the two world wars, Canada, like most of the industrialized world, was hit particularly hard during the Great Depression of the early 1930s. The economic collapse that began with the stock market crash of 1929 devastated the Canadian economy, which was heavily dependent on exporting natural resources and agricultural products. Unemployment rates reached a catastrophic 25% or higher in many areas, and many unemployed men lived in government-run unemployment relief camps, working on public projects for minimal wages. The prairie provinces were especially hard hit by the combination of economic depression and severe drought conditions during the Dust Bowl years, forcing many farmers to abandon their land. The social and economic trauma of the Depression years would shape Canadian politics and lead to the development of more extensive social welfare programs in the following decades. During the Second World War, which began in September 1939 with Germany's invasion of Poland, Canada again made an enormous contribution to the Allied war effort. Over 1.1 million Canadians served in the armed forces during that brutal global conflict, an even larger proportion of the population than in World War I. Canadian forces fought with distinction in numerous campaigns, including the Italian campaign, the D-Day landings at Juno Beach, the liberation of the Netherlands, and the Battle of the Atlantic. The war's cost left nearly 100,000 Canadians dead or wounded, though proportionally fewer casualties than in World War I due to improved medical care and military tactics. The war accelerated Canadian industrialization as the nation's factories produced ships, aircraft, vehicles, and munitions for the Allied cause. It also further strengthened Canadian independence and international standing, as Canada emerged from the war as a significant middle power with an important voice in international affairs. In 1949, Newfoundland became the last province to join Canadian Confederation. Newfoundland had remained separate, first as a British colony and then as an independent dominion, but economic hardship and uncertainty led to a referendum in which Newfoundlanders narrowly voted to join Canada as its 10th province.
In 1965, Canada adopted its current distinctive flag featuring the red maple leaf, replacing flags that had incorporated the British Union Jack. The flag selection process was contentious and emotional, with numerous designs proposed and debated. Here's a selection of some of the other national flags that were proposed during the Great Flag Debate. Let me know in the comments which one you think looks best. In 1982, a milestone in Canadian sovereignty occurred
when the Canada Act passed the Parliament of the United Kingdom and was ratified by Queen Elizabeth II. This act granted Canada the right to amend its own constitution without requiring British parliamentary approval, a process called patriation. Canada promptly exercised this right by adopting the Constitution Act of 1982, which included the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, a landmark document protecting fundamental rights and freedoms of all Canadians. The new Constitution abolished the last remnants of the British Parliament's legal influence over Canada, while still recognizing the constitutional monarchy, with the British monarch serving as Canada's head of state in a mostly ceremonial role. This arrangement reflects Canada's unique path to independence, gradual, evolutionary, and peaceful rather than revolutionary. Canada today is a prosperous nation of over 36 million people and growing, where over 20% speak French as their first language, reflecting the enduring legacy of New France. Canada has developed the 10th largest economy in the world, rich in natural resources, advanced manufacturing, and a strong service sector. It is known internationally for its multiculturalism, social programs, and quality of life. The province of Quebec has maintained a strong French cultural and linguistic influence over the centuries and has developed a distinct identity within Canada. Quebecois nationalism has been a recurring theme in Canadian politics. On two occasions, in 1980 and 1995, Quebec held referendums to decide whether the province should proclaim national sovereignty and become an independent country separate from Canada. The 1995 referendum was particularly dramatic, with the no side favoring remaining in Canada winning by the narrowest of margins, just 50.58% to 49.42%. A difference of only about 54,000 votes out of nearly 5 million cast. The question of Quebec's sovereignty remains a significant issue in Canadian politics to this day, though support for independence has waned somewhat in recent years. This has been Epimetheus, and I hope you've enjoyed this journey through Canadian history. Let me know what you think down in the comments. What Canadian province is your favorite to visit or live in? What aspect of Canadian history interests you most? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to get notifications every time I make a new video. And a big thanks to my supporters over on Patreon who help me keep making content like this. Your support makes these videos possible. Thank you so much for watching till the end of the video. Until next time.